What's up, Packer fans? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can always follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL, but I appreciate you following me here on YouTube. How are we going to talk again about Hub Arkish? This is the last thing that I expected. I know Rachel and I talked about him yesterday, but I feel like we can't get away from it. I feel like we have to address it in some capacity, right? Because he issued an apology. We'll get to that in just a moment, but before we get there, we had Aaron Rodgers comment on Hub Arkish. I had a couple more thoughts on Hub, and then we'll go through his apology as well. I'm going to try to get through this. As you guys, if you know me at all, you know that I would much rather break down Ben Braden film with you than talk about Hub Arkish and idiot comments that he makes. But again, I feel like we have to address them in some capacity. So here we go. First and foremost, as I was thinking more about this, and after Rachel and I talked about it yesterday, and I tweeted this out as well, it just frustrated me even more that when you really think about it, right? So I get that the AP sort of doesn't have any specific criteria for who is the most valuable player. And it's always really fun conjecture of, is it the best player on the best team? Is it the most valuable player? Is it the best player? It's the person with the best stats, and so on and so forth. And you can argue those things in a variety of different ways. However, you have to have some criteria as a voter for what you're basing this on. It shouldn't be, and it can't be just gut feel. Well, I think this person's the MVP. I can't really back it up with reason, but that's the right. There has to be some sort of criteria. And apparently, Hub Arkish would like part of that criteria to be personality traits or lack of being a jerk, which I think the frustrating thing for me is, how are you going to judge that and be judge, jury, and executioner for who is and isn't a jerk in the league? So you believe that what Aaron Rodgers did in the offseason and whatever else was him being one of the biggest jerks in the league, and you're not going to vote for him for that. Okay, so what is your vetting process for who is and isn't a jerk? What is your criteria for who is and isn't a jerk for everyone else? Did you do reference checks and background checks on Tom Brady and Jonathan Taylor and Cooper Kupp? Did you see if they were walking their neighbor across the street and helping them with their groceries? Like, what is the criteria for not being a jerk? Because as much as I have disagreed with Aaron Rodgers and how he's handled some of the COVID stuff, I will say, and as I mentioned on the very first episode that we talked about that, Aaron Rodgers has done a ton, and I mean a ton of tremendous good for this community in Green Bay, whether it be childhood pediatric cancer, whether it be, a variety of other initiatives that he's been a part of, whether it be helping his hometown in Chico when they've dealt with wildfires, whether it be some of the stuff that he did to raise money for businesses that were going out of business due to the pandemic. He has done a variety of different things that I would classify as non-jerkish things. And yes, Aaron Rodgers and I aren't going to agree on everything, but I don't particularly find him to be this just awful person or anything like that. And the point being here is you just can't be the arbiter of who is and isn't a jerk when you're voting for the league's most valuable player. Again, this isn't the Walter Payton Person of the Year award. This is who was the best stinking player on the football field in 2021/2022. And you can have other criteria. While I think you'd be wrong if you wanted to vote for Brady or Jonathan Taylor or Cooper Kupp, you could probably put together some form of criterion argument that would put your, have your case be said with other criteria, whatever the case may be, right? But you can't have it be that you think he's a jerk and therefore you're not going to vote for him. So the more I thought about that, the more upset I got with it. And understandably, when Aaron Rodgers was asked about this by Matt Schneidman to open up his press conference, Aaron Rodgers didn't exactly hold back. And this was his quote, and I'm sure you've probably heard it by now. "I think he's a bum," Rodgers said Wednesday. "I think he's an absolute bum. He doesn't know me. I don't know who he is. No one knew who he was probably until yesterday's comments. I listened to the comments, but to say he had his mind made up in the summertime, in the offseason, that I had zero chance of winning the MVP, in my opinion, should exclude future votes. His problem isn't with me being a bad guy or the biggest jerk in the league. He doesn't know me." He doesn't. And again, how could you possibly have criteria for who is a jerk or who's not a jerk? And kudos to Aaron Rodgers for calling it out. However, I was thinking as this was all going on, and we recorded the episode yesterday, and of course, social media, myself included, piles on Hub Arkish, and we posted on YouTube, and we're posting it again today. I'm starting to think like, there's still a human here, right? Like, I've made mistakes. Like, I had an awful interview question to Matt LaFleur last year, and that went semi-viral, and I'm like kicking myself for that. Like, I was like frustrated. I'm like, I asked a dumb question. I worded it poorly, and I was frustrated by it, and I got called out for it by some people, rightfully so, because it was a bad question. But it's one of those things that you're just like, man, I just wish I would have, asked it differently, or, it just came out wrong. And you're just thinking, and it was nothing egregious. It was nothing that I was calling anyone out for. I just asked a poor question. But I'm thinking like, as a human being, when those things happen and you have any sort of following and it goes semi-viral, you start not feeling the greatest. So I've been there in a very small extent. So I'm thinking, man, this guy's having probably a rough day, an awful day, etc. Right? So then he puts out a tweet, and he says in his tweet, I made a terrible mistake Tuesday with my Aaron Rodgers comments. It was completely my fault. There is no one else to blame, and I am here to try and apologize. So I'm like, okay, all right, this guy is, what? He's trying to make amends here. He made a mistake, got a little out of control on the radio, talking to the guys who, you probably think you're sort of in a safe space talking with your Bear fans. Sometimes it's hyperbolic, right? You're talking to your audience. You think you're talking to Bear fans and Bears and, analysts, and you're going to throw Aaron Rodgers under the bus, and it's going to be funny, and it's going to play well to your audience. And that's like the purview, like that's the view that he had, is like sort of this safe space amongst Bear friends, right? And then that view gets shifted into the national audience, and everyone sees that comment, and now it looks and feels totally different. And you can sort of understand how that could potentially happen, not absolving him of anything, but you can understand how that happens. And then he tweets out his apology, and I'm like, okay, we can ease back a little bit on this guy. He made a mistake. He was sorry for it. I get it. Like I said, I've sort of been there in a much lesser extent. Like, let's cut the guy some slack. Let's just end this. Rodgers called him out to everyone in the world. We're done here. Hopefully AP reconsiders on whether or not he should have a vote or not, or Hub, realizes that he made a mistake and will kind of reconsider how he's going to go, about his voting process. However, he then puts out an additional article for everyone to read and says it's free to read, and tries to explain how it got to this point, and just wrote the dumbest thing ever. And I take back any of my thoughts of like, okay, like he just got caught in a bad moment. Like, he's still trying to cover this up. It is the worst apology, one of the worst apologies, not the worst, but one of the worst apologies I have ever seen. And he tries, like, at the beginning, it like is very, like, you can just see him, right? Like, you can tell he's not sorry, because he goes through like the steps at the beginning to show I'm sorry, and then goes on this diatribe in the middle of basically like how he's the victim, which we'll get into in a second, and then ends it again with I'm sorry. And like, did you not have anyone edit this? Because you should have had somebody edit this. I don't know how you could, like, and I tweeted this out as well. When, again, and you're hearing me now say it, when he originally tweeted and all this stuff goes out, and I'm starting to think about it, I'm like, all right, he made a mistake in the moment, it happens, he's human, etc. Like, I can understand and forgive a mistake, right? We all make mistakes. But then to double down on it in his quote unquote apology, that's really not an apology at all, it just makes you look so much worse. And this is one of my biggest things as a person. When you make a mistake, just own it. It will go away so much quicker. It will be so much better. Own that mistake and live up to it. I've had to do it in my life. I'll have to do it again, I am sure. But the sooner that you can just own to the mistake, and it feels like he wanted to maybe try to get there, but in the middle, it just all fell apart. And these were some of the comments that he made in that article. First of all, he said, I allowed myself to be walked into a conversation about an MVP candidate I knew I would not be voting for. I said some things that, while not unreasonable in the context they were said, I voiced them in totally inappropriate ways. All right, no. First of all, no. All right. You allowed yourself to be walked into a conversation. No, you were part of your normal radio show that you are an analyst on very regularly. That's not being forced into a conversation or walked into a conversation about an MVP candidate. You were having a normal discussion. And as somebody who has done radio hits in Chicago, much less in Green Bay and Milwaukee and a variety of other places, yeah, you will sometimes have conversations that go in a different way. That doesn't mean that you have to entertain those topics. You can change the subject. You can agree to disagree. You can go in a variety of different ways. And again, live mic, things happen. I understand the human side. There are mistakes, but then own it. To say you allowed yourself to be walked in a conversation. No, you were having this conversation. You didn't allow yourself to do anything. You did this. You had the conversation. These were your words, which you're about to double down on in just a minute. And he says, I said some things that, while not unreasonable in the context they were said. No, they were unreasonable in the context they were said. To vote on an MVP candidate based on anything besides on-field accomplishments is not okay. It's wrong, and it is not reasonable. So no, you're still not getting this. And I voiced them in totally inappropriate ways. Yes, you did. All right, we can agree on that one. So, and then an MVP candidate I knew I would not be voting for. So it seems to be implying, and as this article continues to go on, it seems to be implying that he is still set in the fact that he will not be voting for Aaron Rodgers. So multiple issues we still have in that paragraph. Then he continues on and to stick his foot in his mouth even more. Worse yet, quote, worse yet, I've apparently unleashed a small army of self-styled social media and talk radio experts who have no clue what they're talking about to challenge the quality of voting process and would attempt to invalidate any vote or thought process that doesn't agree with their own. A sign of the times, I guess. You idiot. All right, first of all, you've unleashed a small army of self-styled social media and talk radio experts who have no clue what they're talking about. No! Okay. You have no idea what you're talking about. And you are one of the 50 voters. You cannot call out anyone else on what they think the voting process should be because you have a more perverted context of what the voting process should be than anybody else. I would literally rather have anyone voting for the MVP than you based on your comments so far. So no, it is not the radio experts and the self-styled social media people. It is you that is in the wrong for making these dumb, baseless comments on how you're going to vote for MVP. You are the problem, not social media in this instance. Social media can definitely be a problem, but not in this instance, not the radio experts. Everyone is calling you out because you made a very big mistake in how you're going about this process. So no, and I shouldn't say nobody, but for the most part, nobody's looking to invalidate any other vote or anything like that. They're looking to invalidate your vote and your stupid opinion. That's where it's at. Not a sign of the times, a sign of a stupid radio segment, not something that social media is doing wrong or radio hosts are doing wrong. And by the way, you were a guest on a radio talk show when this happened. Like the lack of self-awareness in this entire thing is just beyond me. And I think you can tell I don't get worked up very often, but this is just beyond ridiculous. All right. So then he says, to everyone in any way associated with the AP Awards, you couldn't possibly do the job any better or be more respected by anyone who actually cares about getting it right than getting what they want. Okay. First of all, nobody cares about how anyone else is doing it because as far as we know, they're all doing it right because they're not dumb enough to go on a talk show and tell how they're going to vote in a very wrong way. All right. So we're not calling out the 49 other AP voters. We are specifically calling out you. And then to say for anyone who actually cares about getting it right than getting what they want, it is completely flipped. Everyone is asking you to get it right. If your vote is for Cooper Kupp or Jonathan Taylor or Tom Brady, and you can back that up with how you feel they played on the field, so be it. But you basically said in your initial radio comment that you thought that Brady and Taylor and Cooper Kupp weren't far off from Rodgers. That means they are behind Rodgers. So Rodgers is the leader in the clubhouse for the MVP. So you need to fix your criteria, and the fact that you're getting called out for this is because people care about the NFL, about this award, and about this process, and making sure that this process works better than somebody not voting for the person who's supposed to get it because they personally think that they're a jerk, or more rightfully, because they're a Bears fan. Right? Right. All right, so the statement here of actually getting it right rather than getting what they want, again, and I'll say this again because I want to triple down on it. If you wanted to say Tom Brady's the MVP, you can certainly make an argument for Tom Brady being the MVP. I don't agree with you, But if you want to make that statement and say, based off of what happened on the field and how he's rallied that team and stuff going on with Antonio Brown and still like, oh, okay, again, agree to disagree, but that's we can have a human conversation about that. But this isn't about getting what we want. This isn't about an angry mob of Packer fans getting what they want. For goodness sakes, Mike Florio called you out and defended the Packers and Aaron Rodgers. Known Vikings fan and Packer hater and writer of all things horrible Packers, was so offended by your thought process that even he was upset with your line of thinking. Think about that for a second. Then he continues on, because it's not done yet. Why or how this became a national news story, I don't understand. That just shows that you are not in a right place to be making a vote of this caliber. Like, you don't know how this became a national news story? Are you serious? Like, you are one of 50 people who have this vote for MVP in the biggest sport in the world, maybe besides soccer internationally, but you get what I mean. Biggest sport in the United States, against the player who is the biggest lightning rod for any conversation this season, which is Aaron Rodgers. And you're saying that the best player in the league isn't going to get your vote because you think he's the biggest jerk and you thought that was just going to go poof into the night? Oh, hub. That's all I have to say about that. What a ridiculous 2 days from somebody. And again, I just want to double down on this and say again, I get making a mistake. 100% unequivocally. Been there, done that. We'll do it a million times over. Probably did it in something I said today. I don't know. But own it, be better from it, learn from it, and don't go on a tirade of other people you think are wrong or social media stylists or whatever the heck you used as a how frustrating. You deserve to be dragged for as long as people want to drag you, because that was a childish and immature way to handle a mistake and to apologize for all of it. All right, I'm done. I'm done with Hub Arkish for a long time. Other Packer news, J.J. Molson and Ray Wilborn. What a transition. J.J. Molson and Ray Wilborn returned to the practice squad from COVID IR. Good news there. We couldn't move forward without Molson and Ray Wilborn. And much bigger news, Josh Myers and David Bakhtiari both returned to individual drills, which is a really great sign. Both of them look to be moving around pretty darn well as well. Can't gauge much from one little small video, but hopefully this is the good sign to get both Myers and Bakhtiari to the point that they need to be ready to play in the playoffs. So we'll see what happens there, but a great sign that both of them were doing individual work. Still no Z. Jair remained in the COVID list, so no updates there. And then sort of last but not least, if you will, Davante Adams, you can pretty much tell, does not want to be franchise tagged. He was asked about that on Wednesday as well, and he said, quote, "I'm not sure how to answer that safely, so we'll just cross that bridge when we get there. I like to be professional on here. I will translate in layman's terms. He does not want the franchise tag, and certainly understandably so. And it's going to be very, 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 very difficult for Green Bay to clear enough space to put a franchise tag on Davante anyway. So we will cross all of those bridges in the offseason when we get there. Until then, we've got a Packers-Lions game, a playoffs, and hopefully a Super Bowl run to cover before we get into all the craziness of the offseason. And certainly at that time, we will, be on bated breath to see what we think Hub Arkish thinks the Packers should do come offseason time. Thank you so much for joining me. Always appreciate you. I will be right back here tomorrow with Mike Wall, so make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and make sure to check out that episode. The episodes with Mike are just phenomenal, real nerdy stuff. If you're listening to this, you'll probably love it, so make sure to check out those Friday episodes. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.